Hi Leo, and welcome to your eclipse forecast for the June-July eclipses. So this is designed to take you through the next 6 months, beginning at the 21st of June solar eclipse in Cancer, right through until November when we have our last set of eclipses for 2020. I'm reading this particular forecast as if Leo was rising. So if Leo is not your rising sign, then I do recommend that you go and watch the forecast for whatever your ascendant is, because I think then the predictions around life areas will make a lot more sense. So again, just to say that this is a 6-month forecast. You may not necessarily see the evidence of the themes that I'm talking about straight away. You know, this may be a slow burner for some people, so just bear that in mind. I've also done 2 lots of forecasts to dovetail with this, so you might find those are a helpful adjunct to this particular forecast. But anyway, let's get into it and find out what is in store. So before we start, I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that I have done an astrological overview for the solstice eclipses that I have linked to my astrological written forecast for the June eclipse, and will be on the members page as well. And then in addition to that, I've also done, as I said, the geoscopes on my YouTube channel. So plenty of information for you, but that should help you to navigate the next 6-month cycle, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's start, Leo, with the solar eclipse in Cancer that happens on the 21st of June. So this happens the day after the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere and the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere. And this is the sort of point at which the kind of poles of light and dark are at their most kind of off center, if you like. So it's usually either the maximum amount of daylight in the northern hemisphere and the least amount of daylight in the southern hemisphere. Now for Leos, the sun's movements are particularly important, so I'm going to deal with those first. So the sun is in the 0-degree sort of position of Cancer, and the Sabine symbol I think is going to carry a lot of symbolism for you. So I urge you to check out my astrological overview video where I kind of go into that in more depth, or have a look at my written forecast where you can see all the keywords associated with that Sabine symbol. But it indicates a kind of tide turning, or a sort of a shift of paradigm or cycles, sort of the end of one cycle and the beginning of another one. And I think this is going to have quite a psychological dimension for you, because the sun and the moon will be placed in your 12th house. So this is the house of the psyche, it's the house of the unconscious, it's where we connect to the collective unconscious. So it's the house of dreams, it's the house of where we contact spirits, so mediumship, channeling. It's essentially our boundary between self and the kind of the oceanic kind of all that is. So it can sometimes be difficult to pin down, but I think this is going to be one of those eclipses where when you look back, kind of come the end of 2020, you'll realize that this was quite a momentous moment where you underwent a major psychological shift or a paradigm shift, and turned a corner, an important corner. So I think that's going to be your sort of key message over the next 6 months, is that this is a time of basically turning towards the light, letting the shadows fall behind you. You know, there's that wonderful Maori proverb, turn your face towards the sun, the shadows fall behind you. And if we think about the sort of the whole metaphor of the solstice, it's really about the sun kind of reaching its peak in terms of light in the northern hemisphere, and so the contrast between light and the shadows falls firmly in favor of the light, and kind of emphasizing this particular metaphor or take is the fact that Mercury will be making a conjunction to Sirius. Now, Sirius is the brightest star in our galaxy. It's a binary star, and it appears to be a blue giant sort of at this point. So it's much bigger than our actual sun. And many people refer to it in, theosophical terms as being our connection. This is the sort of spiritual sun. In many traditions, it's considered to be the sort of spiritual sun to our physical sun. the feminine kind of aspect of the sun, if you like. So this is our opportunity to kind of connect, psychologically, and perhaps through our crown chakra, to higher dimensions, and sort of allow a higher perspective to kind of permeate our view, particularly of the past, because Mercury is retrograde. It's in the sign of Cancer, so this will probably have to do with early childhood memories, memories of family dynamics that have kind of imprinted themselves on our psyche, and probably affected things like inner child wounds and trauma, attachment styles, all this kind of stuff. So I really feel as though you're kind of making an enormous internal shift, Leo, which I think is going to set you up for the winter solstice and the eclipses that we have, at the end of the year. And I think that's when you're really going to kind of shine and kind of come into your own, because of course Sirius is about shining, it's about brightness, but at the moment this brightness is sort of hidden in your psyche. People aren't necessarily going to see it, but you are going to feel the difference internally. If you've been feeling quite depressed these last 2 years, if it's been a very, very difficult time for you, psychologically, I think you're really going to turn a corner now, and as I say, by the end of the 6 months you will be a different person. So I think that's the first thing to say. The second thing is that Mercury will be not only making a conjunction to Sirius but to Canopus. So this is the star that forms part of the constellation of the heel or the rudder, and it forms part of a larger constellation of Argo the ship. And there's an interesting sort of maritime or kind of seafaring metaphor going on in this particular eclipse. We've got the sun and moon in Cancer, which is a sign associated with the crab, and so with the seaside. We've got this link to ships and to sort of steering. We've also got Sirius, which is the brightest star in the sky, and I'm sure would have been used by navigators kind of before the time of magnetic compasses. And then we've also got links via Canopus to the sunboat, the sunbark of that was used in Egypt to explain how the sun moved around the earth during the course of its daily sort of rising and setting. And of course the sun would spend time in the underworld, and the 12th house has these kind of underworld connotations. It's not the only house that does. Certainly the 4th and the 8th also do, but this is the one that's particular to your psyche. So as I say, I think you're going to be undergoing some enormous and positive shifts. So I urge you to sort of go and check out the second part of that astrological overview video, because I get into the meanings of the fixed stars quite in depth in that. And then the other thing to say is that on the other side of your chart, you've got Jupiter and Pluto coming together in a conjunction in Capricorn. So this will perfect around about the 30th of June. So this is our second pass of the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that we had back in April. So at the 444 gateway, this was the major sort of aspect that set all those themes in motion. At the 444 gateway. So in many respects, this is kind of like a major paradigm shift for the planet, and I think that the way that you're going to feel it is probably in your body, because this is the 6th house for you. So this is the house of health. It's the house of that kind of mind-body connection. It is your everyday rituals, your schedules, your routines, as well as work colleagues, your work environment. So I think you possibly got a sense back in April that the way that you work is going to change, and for many people it did. Of course, they had to start working from home. They had to start using remote meeting facilities like Zoom and Skype and so on. And I think that what's going to happen now is that probably those changes you're going to see that they probably going to be permanent on some level. So there's this kind of shifting and tweaking that's going on, because of course Jupiter and Pluto are retrograde. So you're almost kind of refining some of the methods that you introduced back in April, probably when quarantine or lockdown started, to try and improve on the way that you work so that it's more effective. And then these two planets will also be making a sextile to Mars. Now Mars is keying into the nodes at this eclipse. So the sun and the moon are in the sign of Cancer, but the nodes are in the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. Only just, though, they've only just precessed into those signs, and that's why we had the last lunar eclipse in that polar axis. So the nodes are making a mutable square to Mars, which is in the last degrees of Pisces, and this will be in your 8th house. So I think over the last few months, while Mars has been going through Pisces, you've been really dealing with issues around shared resources, particularly with significant others. So this will be business partners or long-term partners in the sense of committed relationships, marriage, partners, spouses, that kind of thing. And I think there's been an issue possibly around the violation of trust, or people kind of pushing you to give too much, or vice versa. So, I think there's probably been an issue around boundaries, especially when Mars was close to Neptune, around about the Sagittarius lunar eclipse. I think boundaries for you between you and your other half have been probably quite an issue these last few months. But now I feel as though you're making changes in terms of your everyday schedule to kind of resolve those. So maybe you are being clear about, what time you want for you and for other parts of your life, and what parts are for either your your business partner or your spouse, so that you've kind of got some blocked off time for yourself. And I think you've also realized that boundaries are important for your physical health, not just your kind of mental health, that these two things, kind of go together, because otherwise what happens is we get energy drainage. And certainly Mars in a sign like Pisces could, indicate kind of energy drainage for somebody who's perhaps being a bit demanding or a bit aggressive. And it could also be that you feel as though, because Mars rules your 9th house, it could also be that you feel almost bombarded by other people's viewpoints or beliefs. On some level, maybe your skin is a little bit thinner than usual when it comes to other people's views, and so you've kind of taken things to heart. You've kind of felt it almost as though it's a personal attack, when it may not necessarily be, but because your boundaries are so thin, and because you are finding it difficult to discern one thing from another, because Neptune does tend to sort of blur everything together and make it difficult to sort of, it confuses things. And Mars doesn't like this energy. Mars prefers the sort of more precise energy and the more kind of focused, fiery energy of Aries. So this has been quite a tricky time for Mars. It's almost like sort of 12th house in terms of its cycle through the zodiac. So I think that it's not been an easy time, particularly the 2 weeks since the Sagittarius lunar eclipse. But as I say, things are starting to improve now. That's why we've got the sextile between Jupiter and Pluto. So if you've had problems with colleagues, work people, as well as partners or family members kind of violating your boundaries in particular, I think that you'll start to sort of introduce healthier kind of habits here that will help to contain your energy a little bit and give you the sort of headspace that you need in order to kind of reset and refill the well. So heads up though that Mars will be ingressing into Aries, I think about the 28th of June. So this is not long to go now in terms of the cycle, and then I think you're really going to start to feel a lot more buoyant and clear about what you believe in, and not feel so sort of as I say, under siege almost, overwhelmed, I think is a good word, by what's kind of happening. So something to sort of look forward to. I mean, that's not even a week. It's only a week after this eclipse, so that's almost an immediate improvement in circumstances. But see this as a kind of a lesson, because don't forget that Mars is keying into this T-square with the node. So this is a karmic lesson, and it's a lesson sort of around what you sort of take in, read, kind of and then put out. So this is sort of in terms of information, the media, communications in the sort of very mundane kind of way, particularly when it comes to things like social media, because the North Node for you is in the 11th house. So this is online media, social media, conversations with friends, all of that kind of thing, exchange of ideas, and then fifth house. So your South Node is in the 5th house. So this is kind of children, childhood, romantic partners, creativity, holidays, all that kind of thing. So it could be that that at this time, the way that the Mars thing sort of comes to your attention or gets set off, gets sort of almost inflamed, is through something either to do with a child or children, or holidays. Maybe a holiday gets cancelled and this just sort of sends you off because you were sort of counting on this time to sort of recharge and kind of get your head right, away from the sort of everyday, or it could be that, as I say, something on social media sort of sets you off, but just bear in mind that those energies are kind of leavovers almost from the lunar eclipse, which was very unboundaried energy. It was difficult, as I say, to make clear judgments. So I think just allow this energy to sort of phase out, and try not to overreact, because with all this energy, this Cancerian energy in the 12th house, there is the potential to sort of like act out or kind of vent your emotions in a way that's a little bit irrational. So that's just something to bear in mind. In other words, you may get triggered. So maybe just go off social media for a little bit, pull back a bit from contacts with other people, just until you've kind of regained your equilibrium a little bit. And then, when Mars moves into Aries, I think, as I say, you'll start to feel a lot better. The other thing to say, of course, is that Venus is retrograde in your 11th house. So this can also, it also raises the possibility that the reason why sort of the social dimension is tricky for you either has to do with like past connections to things that have happened with friends sort of in the past, or it may have something to do with your vocation, your direction in life, your career path, because Venus does rule your midheaven, or it could have something to do with self-expression and your own ability to, your throat chakra basically, so your ability to communicate, your ability to listen and to communicate your truth kind of thing. So I think just allow those to clear, because Venus is going to go forward in a week as well. She's going to switch directions on the 25th of June, so again, not long to wait until she goes forward, and then I think that things will start to improve in the 11th house quite substantially. Mercury, of course, is retrograde, so these two planets are currently, there's this overlap between the two of them in both being retrograde. So it's not a great time, as I say, in terms of judgment. So I think just wait for these planets to switch signs or to change direction, which, as I say, is only a week, and then I think you'll start to feel a lot better and things will become a lot clearer. And that, of course, is one of the ways that Sirius could work for you. It could bring clarity because of its connection to Mercury, which is of course cerebral. It's about the mind, it's about communication, it's about seeing the way that we perceive things. So yes, I think just realize this is a 6-month cycle, so there's no rush. I know you're a fire sign, you like things to sort of happen immediately, but I think this is a period of adjustment as the tide kind of goes out and then starts to come back in, and so just bear that in mind. One of the aspects that should help to stabilize things for you is Venus is trying to Saturn. Saturn will be on the cusp of your 7th house, so it will really help to sort of stabilize things and help you to put boundaries in place when it comes to particularly significant others. So this is people that you have contracts with, like business partners, accountants, that kind of thing, as well as marriage partners that we usually sign a kind of contract with. So it's a long-term committed relationship of some kind. So I think things should stabilize there too, and that should also help you to feel a bit more kind of on an even keel, as it were. But generally speaking, as I say, I think that it won't be apparent immediately, but you will start to notice that that actually your mindset is shifting in a positive direction. And I think we've got one more hurdle to kind of overcome, and that's at the lunar eclipse. So let's get on to that next. So, moving on to the lunar eclipse in Capricorn, which happens on the 5th of July. This is the twin, or the kind of counterpart to that Cancer solar eclipse that we have at the solstice. And as you can see from the chart, we've got an absolutely packed 7th house for you, or 6th house, but it looks as though it's in the 7th, full of planets and fixed stars and chart points in the sign of Capricorn. So this is going to be the emphasis for this particular lunar eclipse. So this for you, as I said, is work, health, work routines, rituals, pets, as well as work colleagues, your everyday work environment, all of that kind of thing. So I think this is where you're going to see how the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is going to kind of start to take effect, if you like. You're going to see how it impacts you on a kind of day-to-day domestic kind of level, and that's because of the moon being here. So, you know, the moon for you is about 12th house matters, which is to do with your psyche. It's about your the way that your kind of unconscious beliefs. It's also about beliefs or patterns that we've picked up in childhood. So, you know, all these kind of things that make us feel either secure or insecure, stable or a little bit off center. You know, this is the mind-body kind of connection. And of course, the sun will be emphasizing this. It will be in your 12th house. So it will actually be in the position that Mercury was in at the Cancer solar eclipse. So it's interesting that the sun has now swapped roles with Mercury, which is retrograded back to about 7 degrees of Cancer. So it will be the sun that will now be making a conjunction to Sirius. So as I was saying about that Sirian light, that kind of shining brightly, that inner truth, I think that you will now start to embody that in your person, because of course for you the sun is sort of your ultimate symbol of self-expression, you know, feeling, you know, vital, alive, you know, and in your skin. But returning to Capricorn, so the moon will be in Capricorn and it will be making a conjunction to the fixed star Vega. Now Vega forms part of the constellation of the Lyre, and this really keys into the myths around Orpheus, which I covered in quite a lot of detail in my forecast for the January 2019 solar eclipse in Capricorn. So you might want to go back and have a read about what I said about the Orpheus myth, because you might find that information useful now. Needless to say, I do think that themes could be returning or kind of closing out now from either January or December 2019, because those are the two times when we had solar eclipses in Capricorn. So you might want to just kind of cast your mind back to see whether there's anything that does come up now that that needs to be cleared or healed. More than likely it's going to have something to do with your health, or it's going to have something to do with work or the way that you work. You know, as I say, because we've got this heavy emphasis on the 6th house. But it is connected to the 12th, so as I say, don't forget that there is this kind of mind-body connection to what's happening. Now, I do feel that on some level this is going to have something to do with a resolving of unconscious patterns or beliefs, so being triggered in some way. And the reason that I say that is because the moon and the sun will be making a T-square to Black Moon Lilith in Aries, so this is in your kind of 9th house. So I do feel as though on some level there's some shadow work that is kind of coming up for clearing, and given that Black Moon Lilith is in your 9th house, I do think it has a spiritual dimension to it. It has something to do with your beliefs, or perhaps your cultural conditioning. So I do urge you to perhaps try and get a healing of some kind around about either the eclipse or the 2 weeks that follow, because I think it will prove enormously beneficial and very cathartic for you if you can do that. I think your health will improve enormously if you allow yourself to do this, because I think there's a lot of negative energy possibly in your auric field, and it needs desperately to be cleared. Some of it may have to do with psychic attack or kind of ritual magic, but that's probably going to be in a very small amount of you. I think it has more to do with something to do with kind of enchantment or magic or music, one of those type of things, and that's because of Vega, as I say. So do go and have a look at both my astrological overview forecast, where I get into fixed star alignments with both Lyra and Sirius. Vega is one of the stars in the constellation of Lyra, and as well as that January 2019 forecast. I think it was called the Song of Orpheus. So do go and have a look. It could also have something to do with mastery, of course, because Capricorn is all about mastery of skills or of your time. So it could be that at this stage you're kind of going up a level in terms of your skills, your abilities, your kind of professionalism when it comes to managing your schedule, just being, kind of going pro almost. It could also be that you now move from a kind of 9-to-5 job into something more spiritual. You actually start to do this for a living. So you could kind of be doing mediumship, channeling, healing. You could be teaching possibly around spiritual subjects. So that's another way this energy could work. But yeah, lots kind of going on here. And then Saturn will be on the cusp of your 6th and your 7th house. So it will now have moved back into Capricorn because, of course, Saturn is retrograde. So again, this may be drawing your attention to the last 2 years or so when Saturn was moving through Capricorn. And that's also the time that we've had these kind of Cancer Capricorn eclipses. So there may be an overlap here, as I said. You may be closing out a sort of 18 months to 2 year cycle. And I think Saturn is giving you a chance to sort of go back and cut away what you realize sort of doesn't serve you, and clear the decks basically, so that you're ready when we get to that solstice eclipse in December, when Saturn moves back into Aquarius. You're kind of ready to really embrace the energy of that, the new age of Aquarius, because that's when it's going to sort of peak in terms of energies. So I think you need to see this upcoming 6-month cycle as almost preparation, it's groundwork for that. So, the emphasis is kind of getting your mind and your body prepared for the sort of the influx of good energies and good light and opportunities that are likely to come your way, at that particular time period. Then the other thing to point out is that Mars will have ingressed into Aries, and Venus will be direct. So these are two noticeable improvements for you when it comes to the way that you feel, in terms of your outlook on life, your kind of life philosophy, perhaps also your views about like the fate of the world, feeling more optimistic. You may also be feeling more optimistic about something to do with a foreign connection, because the 9th house can rule foreign connections, or about higher education. It's possible that your studies have been interrupted as a result of the sort of the lockdown and that kind of thing, or your travel plans. Maybe you had travel plans to sort of travel overseas, and those have been put on hold, and now Mars is almost kind of giving you the green light as restrictions ease and travel restrictions start to be removed, that you can now start to move forward again with those plans. Publishing is another one, so this may also have something to do with perhaps a book that you that you want to sell, or that's publication somehow has been affected by the lockdown. I know that the publishing industry has been hit quite hard, so it's possible that that's also been delayed, that kind of hangman energy, and now things start to kind of move forward again. And then the same thing in your 11th house. So things with friends are going to look up. Social media, you're going to feel maybe a little bit differently about groups, your sense of belonging to the whole. You might feel less isolated, because of course 12th house stuff and 8th house can make us feel a little bit isolated. Saturn on the descendant can also, it can stabilize, but it can also make us feel a little bit cut off or lonely. So I mean, it's possible, for example, that your full-time, your kind of long-term partnerships or your business partnerships have taken up a lot of your time, and you haven't really had time for socializing or connecting with others, on social media, and because Saturn does represent time and it can represent limitations. So as I say, I think rejigging your schedule and having had time to sort of rest and recoup will make all the difference when it comes to, the way that you spend your time, and that I think will improve your outlook enormously. And then the other thing to say is that Mars will be approaching a sextile to Venus. So again, I think this is going to have a positive impact on social ties, social connections, group affiliations, your hopes and dreams and desires. So as I say, generally, I think your outlook on life is going to improve quite a lot. You're not going to be feeling quite so pessimistic. I think you possibly also were picking up on the collective, the kind of hive mind and all the fears and negativity that people have been projecting into that as a result of, everything that's been stirred up by, the sort of COVID-19 and the disruptions to sort of everyday life and social structures and that kind of thing. So I think, you expect after this lunar eclipse, within the 2 weeks that follow, for things to start to improve dramatically in terms of your overall outlook, your energy levels, and, your relationships with others. The other thing to say, of course, is that for some of you, this lunar eclipse may have something to do with a connection returning. It could be, a significant romantic connection, but I have to say that I think it's probably a toxic one because of the sort of element of bewitchment, enchantment, the sort of sexual undertones that I think you'll get from my Song of Orpheus kind of interpretation of that January 29 eclipse. That it's possible that you feel kind of almost a soul bond to somebody. There's a very strong sexual tie with someone, and you found it perhaps quite difficult to move on or kind of really feel committed to your new partner as a result of this leftover, these cords that may still be there between you and this other person. So I think, again, cord cutting, healing of some kind is really called for, particularly given that kind of Black Moon Lilith T-square. So, just something to bear in mind. Also psychic protection. But, overall, the sextile is a really positive aspect. Mars is also moving to approach Chiron. Chiron is the wounded healer. So, again, I think there's a chance here to heal wounds, particularly sexual wounds or wounds that we, around peer pressure or kind of peer group situations. Because for me, Chiron is about wounds that we kind of suffer around about the ages of 12, 13. So when we're kind of coming into puberty. So there may be something around that. But, on the whole, this is going to be, I think, quite a cathartic eclipse for you. So I think by the time, we move into the next new moon cycle, you're going to be feeling a lot more buoyant. So that's it for me. I hope this forecast has been useful and enlightening. If you enjoyed it, do hit the like button if you're watching this on YouTube. And don't forget about the other links that I've got in the membership area around the eclipses, which include the video geoscopes for each of the signs, as well as the cosmic overview, which goes more in depth into the astrology of this particular 6-month event. But in the meantime, I'm wishing you all the best, happy solstice blessings, and I'll catch you again for my forecast for the lunar eclipse in Capricorn.